if you don't like either of these two options, but you want a big Lego set, I'm also going to add in as well. Hey guys, this is JP's Lego Reviews. Today, I'm going to be comparing Lego set 71105 or Lego set 75257, since they're basically the same thing. Basically, a play-scale Millennium Falcon versus Lego set 75315, the Moff Gideon's Light Cruiser set. And today we're going to be comparing the building experience, the realism, the displayability of the sets, the playability of the sets, the value proposition of the sets, and finally, the minifigure selection. So, let's break it down. Now, firstly, let's look at the realism factor of these sets. Now, if you look at them, both of them are quite realistic. Well, that's how they're designed. But, also looking at them, there is a slight winner. And the slight winner is the Millennium Falcon set. It's a very slight winner. I'll give it, well, half a score compared to 0. And the reason why is because of these. If Lego didn't include the spring-loaded shooter on top of a Moff Gideon's cruiser, I would have rated them about the same. But because of those things, making them look extremely inaccurate, I have to give it to the Millennium Falcon. Now let's move on to the next section. Now, when it comes to displayability, I have to give it a half a mark to the Millennium Falcon again. And it's due to these spring-loaded shooters. With both the realism and the displayability factor of both of these sets, what's really important and what makes a difference are these spring-loaded shooters. That's because they just don't look unrealistic. They also just look bad as a displayable thing. Now, you can take them off, but they are designed to, be on the set. And because of that, we're comparing them. And yeah, I have to give a slight win to the Millennium Falcon again. And let's move on to the building experience of the set. Now, when it comes to the building experience of the set, I really don't have, any real complaints with them. They're the same for me. Now, they were both equally fun to build, and they were unique in the way that you build them too. It's not very repetitive. You get to see a lot of different stuff. And yeah, there's no real, difference in the way that you build one versus the other that makes it a better or worse experience. And now we're done with building experience, let's move on to my next category. Now, let's look at the value proposition. Now, if you're in the United States or in a country where these sets are priced equally, I think the actual better value proposition is both. I don't really see there being a big difference in value proposition, because the Moff Gideon's cruiser, even though it's a little bit probably smaller, firstly it's longer, and also both of these sets feel really big for what they are. And yeah, but if you're in Australia, for example with us, the light cruiser is more expensive than the Millennium Falcon, we would say in a country like Australia, where obviously one is more expensive than the other, the cheaper set is a better value, because you're getting basically 250 AUD or 160 USD worth of Lego here. But because one of them is actually a little bit higher, in my market, the Light Cruiser is $270. That's why the Millennium Falcon, I'm giving it a very slight win when it comes to value, because in some markets they probably have bumped up the Light Cruiser, and that makes the Millennium Falcon a better value for money. Now, let's move on to the playability of the sets. Now, playability isn't something that simple to figure out, because there's a lot of aspects to playability. For example, I'm just going to move this a bit closer. Now, there's a lot more interior space in the Millennium Falcon. It's very simple to open, and yet the spring-loaded shooters are integrated well, but I've got to give it to the Moff Gideon's Light Cruiser as well for its just handle. It's a very secure set, and I would not pick up the Millennium Falcon from most angles. You probably should hold this one with two hands here and here. With the Moff Gideon's Cruiser on the other hand, you can probably grab it from a lot more places. But which set is actually more playable? Well, it's kind of hard because the Moff Gideon's Cruiser is more playable from the outside, but the inside is quite lacking. You can see there's not really any space whatsoever to move in the set. But with the Millennium Falcon, it's actually a bit harder to play with it on the outside, but let's open it up. The first half of the Millennium Falcon has more space than the Light Cruiser. So it's kind of a conundrum. Do you prefer interior play or exterior play? But in saying that, I still want to give the winner slightly again. It's so slight to the Millennium Falcon. The reason why is because it's more playable on the outside than the Light Cruiser is on the inside. For example, you can play with this somewhat on the outside, but with this set, you cannot actually stand up minifigures in the inside, and that's quite unfortunate. But it's really hard to tell you which one's better. I'll give it very slightly to the Millennium Falcon, just because it is a little bit easier to play this on the outside than the Light Cruiser on the inside. But again, it's very close indeed. And now, let's move on to the minifigure selection of both these sets. Now, here are the minifigure selections for both the Moff Gideon's Light Cruiser and the Millennium Falcon sets. And you can see that the Millennium Falcon comes with an extra minifigure. It also happens to be that way in the Rise of Skywalker. But the exclusive minifigures here in these two are not very interesting. Meanwhile, you have quite a few rare minifigures here as well that you haven't really seen in too many other sets yet. And yeah, I know that these two now have been in a cheaper price point. These two are everywhere. Meanwhile, these ones aren't in as many sets anymore. But I'm going to have to give the minifigure selection here. They're equal. The reason why is you get one minifigure less here than in the Millennium Falcon, but Cara Dune and Moff Gideon make up for the extra minifigure because Moff Gideon is exclusive. Cara Dune is only in one other set. And yeah, you got these minifigures here, which are pretty decent as well, but they kind of round off each other, so they're about equal standing when it comes to minifigure and the minifigure quality. And yeah, let's move on to my final thoughts. Now, what are my final thoughts? Well, I personally think, and I actually somewhat prefer, personally, the Light Cruiser to the Millennium Falcon. But when it comes to value, the value proposition in the Millennium Falcon is just so clearly better. Not just because it's more expensive, well, it's cheaper than the Light Cruiser, but it's also just a better quality of product compared to the Light Cruiser. You get one more minifigure. It's more displayable. It's more playable. It just does more than the Light Cruiser. But if you're trying to choose which two to get, I definitely recommend the Millennium Falcon first. Not just because it's going to retire soon, but also just because it's a better set than the Light Cruiser. But if you're not really too sure of these two sets, and the winner of the comparison is the Millennium Falcon, simply because it is slightly better than the Light Cruiser. But the Light Cruiser is still a really awesome looking set, and it looks great. But if you don't like either of these two options, but you want a big Lego set, I'm also going to add in as well the AT-AT in here. Because this set also costs $250 in Australia or $160 in the US. It's playable, it's displayable, and it looks menacing too. So, I guess out of these three, you probably want to still pick the Millennium Falcon and the AT-AT because they're both really cool sets. And also, the Millennium Falcon and even the AT-AT, they're just better value than a light cruiser. But I recommend all three of these sets. They're all great. Don't get any of these sets for the minifigures though. They're not worth the money anymore. And yeah, if you were to ask me, out of these two that we mainly compared today, go for the Millennium Falcon. But the AT-AT is another option at that price point if you haven't really considered it yet, as it's a really good option for a lot of people as well. And yeah, those are my final thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. If you enjoyed the video, please smash the like button. And if you want to see more content just like this, then please subscribe. I hope you all have a great day and keep building.